Here's a crazy fact. Last year, we spent over $7.5 billion on new cameras and accessories. That's like 2.5 million $3,000 camera sales, which I think is a good thing. A healthy camera market drives forward new tech, but there's also a catch, that there's a lot more money spent in marketing to make you buy more. So in a world where the default answer is more, how are you supposed to know how much you actually need? So in this video, we're gonna discuss how to leverage gear to make yourself a better photographer, the gear that's actually essential to creating stunning images, and finally, we'll go over a few example kits at varying price points so that you can get started no matter your budget. But first, let me tell you about the biggest gear mistake in the game. It's one that I had to learn the hard way, and avoiding it will help you level up 10 times faster than everybody else. The mistake I made at the beginning, and the mistake I see beginners making still, is that I wanted to be able to do everything. And to do everything means having all of the tools, the cameras, the lenses, the filters, the presets, etc. Because then you're prepared to make anything. I didn't want my gear to stifle my creativity. I wanted to make sure I had everything I needed so that I could make anything that I wanted. Which sounds kind of logical, right? Maximum creative freedom equals maximum creative output. But if you arrive in Yosemite with 10 cameras, lenses, the whole cavalry, experience is going to teach you otherwise. The conflict here is that us camera-loving folk have bad gas. Gear acquisition syndrome. We are great at rationalizing purchase if we think it's going to make our work better. Keyword being think, because sometimes it does, many times it doesn't. It comes down to creative bandwidth. If you have 10 cameras, your creativity is just going to get confused. You're going to be doing mental gymnastics just trying to figure out how to use everything that you brought, and that's not creativity. What I learned the hard way was that when I give myself one camera and one lens, that is when I exercise my creativity the most. And when I exercise my creativity, that is when I end up taking my favorite photos. The photos that I wasn't expecting to take, the ones that I surprised myself with. When we limit our options, it fosters creativity because you have to get creative. You have to figure out how to make images with what you already have. By definition, you are forcing yourself to adapt. You are exercising your creativity. And if creativity is a muscle, then exercising it will make it stronger. And so the core philosophy here is less is more, which I bet you've never heard before. But you can't take photos with nothing, so how much is just enough? There are only 6 items I see as essential kit. With 6 items, you'll be able to take stunning images in 80% of scenarios you'll encounter. And for many people, these 6 items are all they will ever need. Now they might want more, but this is all they'll actually need. The most important piece of the puzzle here is obviously the camera. Now, when I say most important, I do not mean that it has to be a fancy camera. What I mean is that you literally cannot take photos without one. You probably heard people say that the best camera is the one that you have, but if you don't have one, pretty much any interchangeable lens camera will do just fine. There are excellent cameras at every budget, and I mean that. 4 years ago, I took to eBay with $60 to see just how far that would get me, and I purchased an old 8 megapixel Canon EOS 30D, and for 60 bucks, it did pretty damn well. Last year, I bought this $70 Nikon FE on eBay, and it quickly became one of my favorite cameras. Now I understand that the gas is strong. Wouldn't it be better if I spent a few $1,000s and got one of these, or one of these? If you've got money to blow, and it's in your budget, sure. But don't make the mistake of thinking that the camera is the thing that's going to make your images better. And keep in mind, we also have 5 more items we need to get to on the list. You don't need to spend a whole lot of money here, and we'll get into some example kits in a little bit. Depending on the camera you get, you'll also need a lens. Now let's assume you're only allowed one lens. What lens should you get? I would argue you should get yourself a standard zoom lens like a 24-70 or a 35-70 millimeter. If you don't understand exactly what that means yet, that's totally okay. Basically, the higher the number, the more zoomed in the lens can go. So a 24-70 goes from wide to zoomed in. This flexibility allows you to shoot a wide variety of different subjects and is a great choice for beginners and professionals alike. How nice of a lens should you get though? Again, anything works here, and the best lens is the one that you have, but I would rather have a good lens on a decent camera than a great camera with a kind of mediocre lens. It is the lens, after all, not the camera, that plays the biggest role in image quality, sharpness, and color rendition, especially on film cameras. And the thing about lenses is that you can keep them after you upgrade your camera. There's a common saying in the photography community, date the camera body, marry the lens. In short, cameras, especially digital ones, will come and go as technology improves, but a good lens will always be a good lens. So I encourage you to take a little bit of that camera money and put it towards a slightly nicer lens. But if there is one item on this list that I will encourage you to splurge on, it's your tripod. To me, there is no more glaring indication of an amateur than a great camera with a crappy tripod. Think about it. You're in Yosemite with your one camera and your one lens, and you're a tunnel view. A photographer comes up alongside you and they've got the brand new Fujifilm X whatever around their neck. Don't get me wrong, it looks real nice, but then they go turn around to their bag and they pull out an Amazon Basics tripod. They set it up, they put their camera on it, but this thing just looks like a house of cards. It's about as sturdy as a boneless chicken. Sure, it's technically a tripod, but you can't depend on it to do tripod things well. This screams beginner to me because it shows that they blew their whole budget on the Fuji and didn't have the experience to understand the value in a good set of sticks. The issue is that at the beginning, you just don't know how crucial a good tripod is. You haven't yet suffered the pain of opening and closing latches over and over in cold weather. You haven't been infuriated by blurry shots because the legs are wobbly. This is a typical beginner's journey in tripods. They buy a cheap tripod just in case they need it. They quickly outgrow it or break it, and so they get a slightly nicer one, but then they outgrow that one, and so they keep climbing the tripod ladder, and by the time they actually get to the one that they're not going to outgrow, they've spent a whole bunch of money on tripods that they would have just been better off not buying in the first place. If you buy a good one, you might not ever need to replace it, but if you buy a bad one, it will likely lead to frustration, replacements, and potentially actually get in the way of your photography. There's a saying for purchases like this: buy once, cry once. Now, don't get too excited. This also doesn't mean that you need to get the bee's knees of tripods. Believe me, they get very expensive very quickly, but you should at least get something that's decently qualified to do the things that you want to do. We'll talk options in a little bit. The next item is often overlooked, but essential for shooting long exposures or shooting at night: a shutter cable release. One of the great things about tripods is that they allow you to shoot long exposures like light trails or starry skies. A shutter cable release or a remote trigger lets you take a photo without actually touching the camera, which prevents camera shake that can result in blurry images when you're shooting with longer shutter speeds. They also allow you to use the bulb mode on your camera, which allows you to shoot an exposure for as long as you're holding down the button. These open up a whole bunch of creative possibilities and, unlike tripods, are super inexpensive. Okay, so you've got all your gear together, you're ready to go out and shoot, but where do you put it? How do you carry it? Many beginners just throw their gear into a random backpack, which doesn't protect it and also doesn't make it easy to access when you need it. Whatever bag you use should facilitate the shooting process. It should stay out of your way while also giving you easy access to things that you need. For casual shoots or walks, I recommend the Peak Design Everyday Sling Bags. They're perfect for just the essential kit, but for larger adventures, you'll probably need a backpack. Also from Peak Design, I love the everyday backpacks. This is not a sponsored read, I'm just a huge fan, and I genuinely think that they make the best camera bags and accessories on the market. You don't need something super fancy, but something that can safely store your camera and accessories and has external carry for a tripod is ideal. Lastly, this piece of gear is not a necessity, it's more of an honorable mention, and it doesn't apply so much if you're shooting digital, but I figured I should bring it up, and it is a light meter. Most film cameras have a built-in light meter, and it's usually pretty decent, but the thing is that they are accurate, but not precise. What I mean by that is that it will give you an accurate reading for the whole frame, but it doesn't have the precision to actually measure the specific areas of luminance throughout the frame. Like if you wanted to hone in on the sky and compare the brightness of the sky relative to a tree in the foreground so that you can make sure that when you shoot the photo of the whole frame, that everything looks nice in the way that you had envisioned it. For these purposes, a meter is an invaluable tool. Now, I'm not going to dive into metering right now. I have a whole video on that if you want to understand it better. And people in the comments seem to think it does a really good job of simplifying a complex topic and making it easy to understand. So I'll link that up here somewhere if you want to check that out. All right, so let's go over a few camera kits, shall we? So I've got this database right here of different kits for both film and digital, from budgets from around $200 to $500, $1,000, $2,000, $3,500, depending on what you have to play with. We don't have time to get into all of these right now. That would take way too long. But if you go down into the description of this video, I will send you this link. And then with this database, there will also be an accompanying video where I'm kind of walking you through all of the different choices and whatnot, because many of these things are things that I've actually personally used, personally own. Some of them are things that I've researched, but I'll get into all that in the kind of downloadable yada yada yada. But yeah, let's just go over a couple options here. So let's say we want a film camera and we want a whole kit for $200, which might seem kind of ambitious, and it is, but it is 100% doable. And the camera that I recommend is actually the one that I was just talking about, the Nikon FE, the one that I got for $70. I mean, they got one here for $46. You really don't need to spend a whole lot of money on this, and it's kind of one of those cameras that's just really slept on. I have a video on it, we won't get too into it. The lens that I use is this one, the Nikkor 35 to 70 millimeter f3.5. I chose this one because it's a nice standard range zoom that's got excellent optical quality. It's nice and sharp. It's also not that expensive, coincidentally. The tripod that I recommend is this Ulanzi MT55. Now, I have not personally used this tripod, but from what I have gathered in all of my research on budget-friendly, high-quality tripods, this kind of seems to be breaking the norm of spending less than $100 and actually getting a good piece of kit. Yeah, this might be one of those situations where you don't actually need to spend a whole lot of money on a good tripod. For the shutter cable release, for most of the film cameras, you're just gonna see this. $6, standard universal kind of thing. Easy money. For the bag, we've got this K&F Concept 2-in-1 sling bag. This is $35. I have not used this, but it's got great reviews. I've seen people talk about it a few times. It's got external carry for a tripod. It'll keep your camera safe and keep things available and easy access when you're trying to shoot. So checks all the boxes. $35. For meter, we're not going to be getting a meter because meters are one of those things that are kind of expensive across the board. So we will just be using a phone app for now. But let's say we wanted to get a digital kit for around $1,000. Then the camera I would recommend would be the Sony a6300, which you can get for around $450. I owned this camera for a very long time. It's actually what I shot most of my decent digital photos on, like all of my fine art landscape photography work. Like, people think that you need this really fancy big full frame camera, but I found that, you know, in all of my travels, this thing just did the job better. It was smaller, it was lighter, and it took amazing photos. I still highly recommend this. It's still incredible. The image quality holds up flawlessly. Excellent camera. The lens that I recommend is the Sony Vario 16 to 70 millimeter f4 Zeiss. And this is great because it's really sharp, nice zoom range. It's about a 24 to 105 millimeter equivalent, I believe. I think I wrote it down here. Yeah, 24 to 105 equivalent, because this is a crop sensor. It might not be the fastest lens at f4, but damn, is it great for photography. The tripod I recommend is the SmallRig AP02. We've got a little bit more money to play with. I have not used this tripod, but this is another one of those ones that kept coming up in my research, and it looks really compelling. I am feeling the itch to buy one of these cheap tripods because I could use another set of sticks. Shutter release cable, got to spend a little bit more. Got to spend $9 instead of $6. And then for bag, we've got another sling bag. This is a pre-owned Peak Design everyday sling bag. I have the 3-liter and the 10-liter. Peak Design stuff is incredible. You can get a new one for not much more than this, but why would you do that when Peak Design literally offers a lifetime guarantee on all of their products, even if you purchase it secondhand? So I would get a secondhand one. And then let's go over one more. Let's say we got $1,000 to spend and we want to get a film kit. The camera that I would recommend is the Canon EOS 3. Now, I have a video on this camera. This, to me, is like the pinnacle of analog advanced technologies. Like, it might feel a little bit digital sometimes, but this is the most capable 35mm camera that I can possibly think of. It's actually, fun fact, the camera that my mom used to take childhood photos when I was a kid, and it was the one that I inherited, and it's the one that was kind of like my segue into film. Little did I know that it was just one of the most incredibly advanced film cameras out there, and the fact that it's only a couple $100, I think maybe it's because it kind of looks more like a modern camera, but it is just so incredible. I love using that camera. Lens that I recommend, the Tamron 28 to 75mm f2.8. Nice fast aperture of f2.8, great focal range, nice and sharp. what more do you need? For the tripod, we're also gonna be looking at the SmallRig AP02. And then for the cable release, we gotta spend $13 because this is kind of a proprietary one, but still only 13 bucks. Once again, Peak Design, sling bag, 3 liter. I don't think you actually need a meter when shooting on the EOS 3 because the meter in there is actually really precise. Like I've never felt the need to actually shoot with a meter when using that camera. But yeah, we could talk at length about all of the items on this list. I'm gonna save that for a later video. You can find that down in the description. Yeah, no more screen recording. All right, so hopefully now you've decided what kit is best for you, but even the best kit is nothing if you don't know how to use it properly. Especially when shooting film, there's lots to learn. And there are a few pitfalls that nearly every beginner falls victim to that causes them to waste their film, waste their money, result in crappy images, and ultimately leaves you demoralized questioning if photography is even right for you to begin with. To avoid the beginner mistakes that I made, save yourself a whole lot of time, stress, and money, check out this video right here.